Welcome back to Straight Talk. It is good to have a co-host here, Dr. Brian Hartley. And as always, we want you to like, share, comment on the Straight Talk. We will answer your questions either live as we have opportunity, or at the next week's time. We'll come back to some of the questions as we have opportunity. We are going to try to keep these a little shorter, but we do thank all of you for joining us in season 1, as we covered a lot of ground, a lot of content about what all is going on at Greenville University these days. But we thought it'd be fun to do a little throwback reel, and that is why Dr. Hartley is here. He has been my chief academic officer for the past few years, and even before me, with Dr. Ivan Philby as president, and has served in various capacities across the institution. Many of you probably have had him in class, perhaps for a theology class. I know I traveled to Chicago. We'll talk a little bit about that today with Dr. Hartley. And so we're just going to have a little bit of fun here in season 2, bantering back and forth, as Dr. Hartley tends to be a little bit more about tradition, and I tend to be a little bit more about innovation. And I think there's all these new great ideas, and then he'll remind me there's nothing new under the sun, which is kind of a fun banter. So we hope to have you participate in that with us. And then after we do 5 sessions here in season 2 on Wednesdays, we hope to make a comeback this fall and perhaps co-host some opportunities with some friends around campus, and maybe some of you would like to come and join us for a friendly banter this fall. And so that's kind of the idea, is we're just going to set up with some of our conversations that we typically have behind closed doors about tradition and innovation, but we're going to bring some of that out to light to share with all of you, because we frankly think it's kind of fun. So again, like, share, comment, ask questions on the page, and someone will get back to you either in the comments. We'll address it this week or next week as we are able. I will periodically check for questions on the chat here in the Facebook function. So first, we just wanted to introduce ourselves a little bit and talk about why we love GU. Well, Greenville College as students, and now Greenville University. And I've introduced Brian a little bit, but I would love, Brian, for you just to introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about why you love GU.
Thanks, Suzanne. I think a lot of folks know my story. I came primarily because of the Free Methodist connection, and I had never been on campus before. And coming from Oklahoma, Arkansas area, it was something to be let out by my parents at the dorm room, unload my drums, my books, and settle in for a term at a place that I'd never seen before. But Greenville really became a place for me that provided me with at least 3 things. One was a sense of vocation. That was a sense of calling. I'd been a part of a very large high school, almost 1,000 in my graduating class, in an honors program. So I had an academic life. I worked in a hospital where I was an orderly, worked in intensive care. And so I had that part of my life. And then I spent a lot of time in the church. So I really had these 3 worlds. What Greenville helped me to do, particularly through the faculty here, through faith learning integration, was to bring those 3 worlds together and find my place so that I could go out in service to Christ. Second thing that I received was that sense of place, a sense of rootedness. I'd grown up, my father had been a pastor for most of my growing up years. And so we moved from community to community. And I'd never lived in a place for longer than a few years. So to be able to come one place for 4 years and be a part of these great traditions, such as the cutting of the ivy when I graduated alongside my wife at that point. And then speaking of my wife, the third thing I found was a partner. Now, not everybody finds a partner here, but I think you and I are good examples of people who came to Greenville, and we found someone here who really became a life partner. So my wife and I just celebrated 44 years of marriage together, and I'm so grateful for the chance to meet someone here who had some common background in terms of wanting to serve Christ throughout her life.
Yeah, I think that's a common story that people who come to Greenville University as students, sometimes as faculty, as staff, or even just other stakeholders that engage with GU, you hear that they discover a sense of vocation, calling, meaningful work and service in society, as well as just that sense of place where you feel heard and seen and discover who you are. And then oftentimes a spouse, like you said, that was true for me. And I shared this in season 1, that I kind of stumbled across Greenville University after a Division I scholarship fell through to run track. And if any of you know, we have, recruiters that are willing to take on all sorts of athletes. So I came for all the wrong reasons. I came for athletics and ended up traveling across the river as one of my brothers was actually passing away from a horrific genetic disease. And just the ability to talk about that with my faculty as mentors really coming alongside me during that time, as well as coaches who cared about me as an individual. And like you said, that sense of place where people came from all over the globe, but yet you still feel that you were seen and heard and understood as an individual holistically. That was huge. And then I found my spouse. I think Phil was our current first dude. Now he embraces the first gentleman title, but he was the first real good relationship that I ever had with a significant other. Obviously, that marriage has lasted now a lifetime, and we just enjoy every day together. So I think that's a common story of Greenville alums, is they have an experience here that leads them to vocation, that gives them that sense of place and a holistic education, as well as just relationships that last a lifetime. I'd love if some of you are watching and would want to share some of those stories, even in the comments of the chat. It would be great to hear if your experience involves one of those 3 things: vocation and calling, maybe a mentoring relationship, a sense of place where you fit in, or maybe even a spouse. So if you want to post that, we'd be glad to hear your stories and maybe talk about those, some of them and some of the themes, maybe not specifically next week. But I think one of the things, Brian, that we've been talking a lot about is how our experiences on campus are similar and in some ways different from students who come today. So I know I'm always saying, well, but students today need this, or we need to evolve a little bit, but yet we keep coming back to some of the core things that seem to matter the most about how we carry out our mission. So many things are the same in the way that we empower students for lives of character and service, Christ-like character and service, but some things are very different. You want to talk about maybe some of the similarities and differences?
Sure. I think one of the key similarities is our emphasis on experiential education. And that is, I think oftentimes when people look at where we're at on the map and they see that we're in a small rural community, there's this feeling of, can anything good come out of Nazareth? But you and I both know that we came to Nazareth, but were shown Jerusalem, and we were shown the uttermost parts of the world. So in my very first year here, my first semester, I had that wonderful experience of going to Chicago with Dr. Jim Reinhardt. And I'll never forget that Saturday being let off at Operation Push and meeting Dr. Jesse Jackson. And that experience as a Southern boy, 18-year-old boy, of being a minority for the first time in a sea of Black faces. And that really woke me up in many ways to a larger world and to the city. And so part of my ministry when I left Greenville was to London, England, and to Toronto, Canada, because of that sense of the city. And then in the spring, I was able to go with Dr. Jim Stewart to St. Meinrad's. And coming out of an evangelical subculture where I didn't engage Christians from other parts of the church, to meet Roman Catholics who were very sincere and earnest, like I was. And as you know, we've continued that 50-year tradition of taking both students and faculty to St. Meinrad. It's a place of respite, but it's also a place to get on fire for Jesus, because you come in contact with people who serve Christ in a different way, but they found their vocation. And finding others who have discovered their vocation really rubs off on our students, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. And we still do those kinds of trips to this day. So in that way, it's very similar. I mean, I had a similar experience as well. I think I've told our audience before that one of the most transformative experiences for me was the Chicago trip. I went with you and Dr. McPeak at the time. So different people have led that trip, obviously, over the years. But I remember being dropped off at a hostel in downtown Chicago and thinking they're really going to leave us here and trust us that this is going to be okay. And then we went to Hindu, Buddhist, all sorts, Unitarian, I mean, all sorts of different world religions. And it was really the first time that I grappled with my own faith and reason for even my own existence, and thought about some of the deepest, biggest questions of life. And that just kind of set a whole set of things in motion, like I said, that ended up in mentorship by Dr. McPeak and all sorts of things that I think that is a similar experience to what our students are getting today. And we're actually increasing that in the way we deliver education across our curriculum. And part of that is because of some of the differences we've noticed with our students, that I think that this type of experiential learning, like Chicago or St. Meinrad's for you, or all the other experiences that we had. I went to Mexico City with some professors and had some different experience. So I think what we're doing is even more of that in our curriculum because of the challenges that we see for our students today. You want to talk maybe a little bit about why we think, students even need that more so because of some of the differences in our students when they come to us today?
Yeah, we have a much more diverse group of students than when either you, and certainly when I was here. Many of our students come unchurched. They do not know who Christ is. They do not have a good view of what the church is and about their calling in life. We have more diversity in our ranks, which is wonderful, both international and domestic. We still have about a third of our students are first generation students, like many that we've had before. And so they don't come with a mentor or a model for how to do that. And then I think COVID has certainly interjected a host of other issues. A lot of our students have spent a lot more time online. They've not been able to develop the social skills. They're hungry to be together, but they're not quite sure how to be together. And so part of what we have to do in that very first year is help them begin to learn some of those basic skills of success in life.
No, I think that's right. And I think that hunger for what we're providing is a common theme that I've seen in our students who come their very first year. I mean, I kind of say it pithy, but if you're a criminal justice major, you should go to prison in your very first year. If you're an education major, you will know whether you like teaching, but you shouldn't figure out at the end in your fourth year. You should figure out in your very first year if you like the classroom and teaching. So that's something that our students, as we start thinking about how you determine vocation, is so important early and often. And then, like you said, how to interact in a team, that agility to shift and move and figure out what content is relevant throughout your 4 years is just so important, and how to use that information, that knowledge that you're growing. So, that's really all we had to talk about today. We will be back next week with other topics on tradition and innovation. I figure we'll eventually get to some of our healthy banter. This week was more introduction. So we hope that you'll tune in next week. And again, continue to ask questions, share the page, so that other people can join in this fun conversation. But I do know that Dr. Hartley, it is my pleasure to serve along you and to serve as president at Greenville University.
And it's been a pleasure, Suzanne, for me to be able to serve alongside you as Chief Academic Officer. And we look forward to hearing from some of those who are out there in Facebook land today.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining.